Well, you were right. Yeah, I guess if we're logging on, so he's not here, is he online only?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, you'd have to try it.
We'll just try it.
Or
If
you
it
can test it out.
doesn't work, if it doesn't work, we'll just cancel it. It's no problem. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Sorry, just starting a little bit late. Okay, so yes, last session, still on the topic of celebrating successes, and then I'm just going to close the meeting with some general thoughts about where we're going and what have you. So, Graham Boyle, thank you very much.
Afternoon, everyone. So firstly, my attention to detail was terrible because I thought I was actually on 5:15. So thanks to Kieran for pointing out that I was actually on next. So all I'm briefly going to do is just look at our service, where we are at the moment, and the hit that we carried out last summer. So, and how really it led into a collaborative relationship with our health protection service in North Wales. So, as you'll see, there's not a great deal of detail in terms of data. That's not my forte. You will see some sort of results out there as we move through, but it's just a bit of good news for us, really, because we've had a good year. We've worked really well, and for me, I think we've been well supported by our management and by our local area planning board. So things have really moved on in the last 12 months. I'll give you a brief overview shortly of the team across North Wales. And for those of you, so I forgot to introduce myself. So for those of you that don't know me, there's a lot of familiar faces in here, and it's brilliant to see you all, because we really look forward to coming here. We get excited because we can escape North Wales, and we've got somewhere new other than Rill to go to, so it's quite nice. So yeah, I lead the community bloodborne virus nurses across North Wales. It sounds great. There are only 3 of them, and myself. So it's a small team covering a huge area. So I'll give you an overview of where we were in terms of why we came up with this hit within SMS, and mainly because testing within SMS in North Wales has been difficult. We've really struggled to increase numbers, and it's not because of they're not willing to do it. It's more challenges in terms of staffing and across all the offices, really. So we had to come up with a way of understanding why this is the case. So we instigated these hits last year, and they were very successful. So SMS in North Wales, there are 6 SMS offices, and there are currently 2,500 people registered within the service. And that's a mixture of alcohol users and people who inject drugs and polydrug use. So, and as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 BBV nurses covering the whole area. You'll be familiar now with the map. Betsy covers a huge area. We've got the new Hollywood over in Wrexham there. So it's that in itself has brought about some unique challenges. We run testing events out and about in the community, and we're sort of dodging film crews and things like that. So that's actually true. The last one we did on the pharmacy project testing, there were Disney film crews out and about that we were trying to duck and dive amongst, and drones flying over the top of the street as well. So Wrexham's a challenging area. And then as we move further west across each region, each region has its own challenges really. And then Hannah, the BBV nurse who covers the west, it's a huge geographical challenge over there. And it's not an easy sort of area to cover for 3 nurses. So what we did was, how can we maximise testing with limited resources? Because there really were just the 3 of them and myself. What we decided to do was, obviously, most concentrated amount of people who we need to target were coming into SMS. So it made sense to run the hit there. And one of the things that I wanted to do to identify and understand why the SMS staff weren't testing. What were the barriers that are continually there and have been over the years that just don't appear to be sort of identified really. So it was really effective for that. I learned a lot. Partly, I have to put my hand up and say we've probably made a few mistakes in terms of our training packages in the past. Being a nurse, I sort of take it for granted that I can go in and just teach people to prick somebody's finger and off you go. But what I've quickly learned was when social workers or people who are not clinically experienced, it's an issue. So I had to understand that myself, and that gave me a really good feel for why they don't want to test and how I can address that. So I know SMS management have been brilliant in supporting us now to be able to put together a new training package to overcome this. So I think things are beginning to look really hopeful that we can get the SMS staff to begin doing that. And part of what we're doing is with all the new starters coming in, we get them straight away. So BBV's right on there, and they're beginning, it's been in there in the past, during their assessment clinics, they are beginning to do more and more testing, which is a huge leap forward from what they were doing. So about 12 months ago, I received an email, and it's highly unusual because it was a person offering all their staff to come and help us do testing. So I was immediately suspicious, and I thought, first time since I've been working in the health service that anybody has ever come to me and said, can we work for you? So we had some talks, and a person by the name of Wendy T, who I became very familiar with, because I ended up doing lots of work in the background to get this up and running, SOPs, risk assessments, but the outcome has been a really successful collaborative partnership with their team. So that's what really this presentation is about, more so than the hit in itself. It's how the hit brought about the collaboration between the teams and where we're going with it. So the hit was carried out over a 12-week period between July and September 23, and it was mainly the 3 BBV nurses that did them in each SMS offices with support from health protection staff. The idea being they'd come in and support us so that we could gently break them into working with our cohort of service users, really. They were a very clinically experienced team. However, they had limited exposure to substance misuse. And that was quite interesting in itself, but they embraced it, and they really enjoy it now. They all look forward to coming out with us. It was an ideal opportunity, basically, as I say, to bed them in, and we're 12 months in, and they're out and about on their own now. So it's really working well for us. As I mentioned earlier, number of barriers to SMS testing. We've managed to overcome that. We've put into special training packages, and one of those is that instead of just going in there now and saying to them, right, do this, do that, do the other, that's the easy part. We now support key workers throughout, so we get them to come and work with us. So the idea being that new starters will now attend our clinics with us for so many weeks. We sign them off as proficient and away they go, because the biggest issue is approaching people for a test. As we know, it's all about how you ask people, isn't it? And I think going back to what people have mentioned earlier on, it's, would you like a HIV hepatitis test? No, thank you. But as was previously identified, for me, it's all about saying, can we have a quick look at your liver health and a quick chat? And then when we sit them down, that's when we'll expand upon it. But it's hooking them in to start with. And that is what we do with the key workers now. And they're starting to get it. Finally, it's starting to sort of, even amongst the sort of the old stalwarts within SMS, we're starting to see the BBV kind of message eventually drop, and we're seeing some success with them. So it's really good. Health protection staff, again, they're going out spreading the word for us in North Wales. They have been absolutely fantastic. We're now at a stage where some new things for me, really, people knocking doors and asking for tests, because you stand back in surprise and think, are you lost? No, I actually want a BBV test. So for us, that's highly unusual. You know, I've been doing this job 7 years now, and it's probably the first time I've ever known that, where people are actively seeking out testing, which is what we wanted. And we're beginning to see those, you know, those first signs that, great, it's starting to get out there. Because as we know, there's a lot of the issues we face are people get the wrong messages amongst their peers, and the fear of the treatment, the fear of coming into us. So we're starting to see the signs that we're beginning to get the word out, and people are sort of spreading that message for us. Done is, on the back of this hit, then we managed to test 640 people over 3 months. I know Becky and Wrexham, bless her, on the first week tested about 90 people. And I think, did we have something like 35 come back antibody positive? So we were slightly terrified that we'd just opened some kind of Pandora's box. But thankfully, it wasn't as bad as we thought, because it tailed off after that. But in that initial week was quite scary, really. Did we have the capacity to be able to treat what we were finding? But we managed to get through it. Where are we? Yeah. Nope. There you go. So yeah, it was a really successful project. I'm not going to go into facts, figures and data, because I think we've all had quite a lot of that this afternoon. As I said, for me, this is just a good news story, and it's an opportunity to maximise our potential for very little cost to us, really. So I think we've gone from a 3-person BBV team to, where are we? I think we've got approximately 12 extra staff that is provided by the Health Protection Service. So it's approximately 3 or 4 per area, which has been fantastic. I'd say we've identified barriers to testing. Why? We've got plans in place now to overcome those, and the collaboration between the teams. So where are we now? I told you it was going to be brief, didn't I? Yeah, for me, the benefit of this whole hit has been this: Health Protection now do our Hep B vaccine clinics in SMS offices on a monthly basis. So each office is covered, and they are now up and running on the probation project. So Health Protection Service now staff the probation offices in 3 areas across North Wales. We're looking to expand that into all 6 offices across North Wales. And essentially, they are away doing that testing on their own. In the last 2 weeks, they've done 30 tests, which for me, in the initial stages of the project, I find really encouraging, because the staff are doing it themselves without our support in the background of actually engaging people. But the good news is that they're beginning to build that confidence up, and 30 tests in 2 weeks, I can see being really promising. In terms of the Hep B vaccination clinics. I'm really surprised. We've had a really encouraging uptake of hepatitis B vaccinations. In first 2 weeks, they did 12 people in one office. What we're finding is in the current climate, that is a good uptake. In Wrexham, there tends to be a little bit of hesitancy towards vaccines at the moment. And I didn't expect that at all. So that just goes to show it's a worthwhile project for that alone. And I know Wendy's watching this in the background there somewhere over in North Wales. So we have plans to expand that. And I think it was mentioned earlier that can we use the probation project to provide hepatitis B vaccination? That is one thing that we're looking at. So as soon as the staff are embedded, confident in doing the DBSTs, we'll start to introduce the Hep B vaccines. I think it's just a case of building their confidence really before we start to expand it. Other than that, I think that's more or less it. Yeah, I'm glad to say Becky hasn't thrown any curveballs in this presentation for me. She did do in the past, but that's about it. So any questions? I knew you were going to ask me one. I could see the hand going. Yeah.
Do this test and have been for at least a decade.
Yeah.
So how do we move the emphasis on testing back to substance misuse staff? You alluded to it, but I got a sense that actually it was the health protection staff that were coming to the fore more than substance misuse staff doing the testing on their clients.
In fairness, the SMS staff are coming around to it. There are extreme challenges in terms of staffing at the moment in SMS, which are causing quite severe issues in amongst key working alone. And I'm being really cautious as to how we push our BBV testing. I don't want to sort of allow it to become an issue, but there are plans. What we're looking at is essentially job descriptions, inputting the fact that they must do BBV as part of their job description. New staff, obviously, they're new, they're coming in, they're far more open to doing the tests. And I think for me, I am seeing positive results and positive changes to attitude. I think historically we've had issues, BBV in the past, we've done testing, we've lost people. It's taken a long time to get people through treatment. I think one of the most positive things that we see now is people see a rapid sort of diagnosis to treatment, 1 or 2 weeks. And once key workers start seeing that, it makes a huge difference because they know they'll do the test and they get in a result. So for us, that's the biggest positive, really. Any other questions?
I'm going to move us on, actually. Thank you ever so much. And just very quickly on that last point, people are more likely to test if the treatment follows rapidly on. So it's really important that we hear that message from the treatment side and make sure that we've got that low access to treatment. And I meant to pick up earlier that from one of the talks about in Rhondda, 3 people not going to hospital. Well, we know these patients don't go to hospital, so we've got to move away from that model. And there's obviously something that needs to be done in the Rhondda area in that regard, because I've said it. I'm gonna move us on. Only in the interest of time. But if I get time later, I'll come back to you. Is that okay?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean now, is it? Right, afternoon, everyone. And true fashion, like someone else said before, I think I've been thrown in the deep end here for a presentation. Luckily, Brendan's a big wig, so I opened up his email and realised my name was on the agenda. So that was yesterday as well. So in true harm reduction fashion as well, I've thrown this together in a half hour and it's full of pictures. So I'll waffle for nowhere. So it's quite nice to present about the work in Western Bay in a positive light. I'm normally presenting to Michael and Josie in a negative manner with our high drug-related deaths. So it's quite nice to talk about the positive work going on for a change. And also there's no Twin Town quotes or pictures in my presentation. So which that one's it. So background and context. So KPI 6 has been mentioned a few times. So I'm harm reduction lead, and I've taken on the role of adopting the poor relative, which is KPI 6, which no one wanted, which is the BPV targets that we were assigned to our area. So our denominator, 50%, Josie, was around 800, I think, in year 1, and then up to 100% was 1600 in year 2. Obviously, COVID hit then, which BPV testing really hit the floor. Pleased to say we've smashed that KPI now, so we're through that. So how we were feeling at the time. So when I first started in 2018, I think Graham mentioned there, it's just kind of revisiting. If I heard the word refresher training one more time, I would have screamed. So pulling teeth, there was an analogy there, walking around in circles, repeating the same thing over and over again, and also regurgitating the same information. With the high turnover of staff within the sector as well, it become really difficult. Also, I think refresher training to the same member of staff 10 times was a little bit like, come on. How services were feeling as well. Oh no, not you again. So I kind of, like myself, when part of a commissioning team, they thought I was like the Chancellor of the Exchequer walking in with a red briefcase with loads of money, which simply wasn't the case. I was focusing on harm reduction interventions across the region and ensuring that KPI 6 was being met. So services, I love admin. So I kind of, Jim mentioned earlier about the numerous spreadsheets. During the pandemic, we launched Wikis, which was a headache for services to get around virtually as well. But also kind of, I was flying the flag for Neo, kind of saying it's not the same. Don't put them in the same bracket. We can work through it. And often services were thought they were in a dictatorship, being told what to do over and over and over again. So then along came COVID. This is a representative of my house. My wife decided to get pregnant and have a dog in the pandemic, so working from home with that. We saw testing. She's told us loads of pictures, light-hearted. I know you've got a booth booked in Pop World, so it'll be quick. So testing obviously ceased for the purpose of COVID testing, and then services closed their doors and didn't operate on a face-to-face basis. So obviously working with Josie when she was head of the public, the substance misuse team then, we looked at the public health monitoring data that showed a cliff edge drop in needle and syringe program when we went into that first lockdown. Reuse and sharing of equipment, when the intelligence monitoring showed that was going through the roof, and it was a really scary time. We were in a service or a sector where we needed to put eyes on people for their physical and mental well-being. We needed to see those individuals. That's the purpose of a needle and syringe program. And lo and behold, we saw services in the pandemic operating a McDonald's-esque service where they're dropping needles through a drive-through window almost. That is not an engagement technique. We needed to be putting eyes on people. We needed to be talking to individuals to see what was happening. I've got notes, they've completely got out the window. So the reality of COVID, this was a kind of turning point for me. If you look at the bottom there, individuals offered screening. This was from the infectious disease report that came out in 2022. Number of sites was 1, and that was our BPV lead at the time that was commissioned through the NEWID partnership, and only 17 individuals were offered screening. Testing had restarted, there was no need, we had the appropriate policies and procedures in place. And if you look at other numbers there, so Naira and Bevan 525, which is Gavin's team, it was, we were just going back, why is ours so bad? So when we looked into it, we needed a big culture shift. And from this is a kind of quote that I've used through the BPV planning and replanning or restart of planning. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think I wrote about 18 strategies in the pandemic. I wrote a communication strategy one, so a communication strategy, how to talk to people. And what happened then, if you didn't bring people along with you on a strategy, they were pointless because culture would eat strategy for breakfast. And when we talk about specialist services testing, we need to see a big culture shift. And that was both with naloxone and BBV testing. Going into a room without a naloxone kit or without a BBV grab bag was showing you weren't embedded in that culture. You didn't believe in testing. So we had a lot of work to do within that. Well, so a couple of we're in a pandemic unless we've done a survey as well. So I think SurveyMonkey kind of had registrations through the roof. I'm not a nurse, not my job. They drink alcohol, so they don't need a test, or they're alcohol dependent, so not at risk was another one. We haven't been vaccinated. I haven't got new access, which Dan and Michelle and Gareth would have been familiar with at the times. Haven't been trained. And the last one that blew my mind was no one wants to be tested. It's a famous saying, excuses are worse than lies sometimes. And I think quite often in surveys, it was a way of masking the fact that people didn't want to test. And lo and behold, we restructured within the BBV commission. We restructured how we commissioned the role of the BBV lead. And we got introduced then to the BV team. Sorry, James, I haven't put a Superman on you or anything, so that could be arranged next year. So obviously Georgie isn't in that as well. She's a big part of that team. But what happened was we decommissioned a role. We got introduced to the BV team. Jamie Harris introduced them to me as the gastroenterology team. I was like, oh, that sounds posh, what they do. So yeah, and then that's when the partnership actually kind of flourished. I've never met a team that is so proactive and solution focused in terms of they'll just say yes to everything. And if they don't say yes, they'll give you solutions on how we can proceed with an innovation, which is really, really good. If it wasn't for these guys, our BV rates wouldn't have increased. They wouldn't have gone to where they, they wouldn't, we wouldn't be retested. We wouldn't, specialist services would be on the floor. What happened with the pandemic is these guys were able to come to the specialist sites as well. So they were able to base themselves in the service. They come out to Singleton Hospital. They had a nosebleed when they come out as well, do Paul? But no, basing themselves within the organisations, they actually provided that robust leadership, and they showed that kind of excuse that no one wants to be tested. They alleviated that because they were testing people. Georgie tested someone in Neath before the guy could say no. She bled him and he was eating a wagon wheel. So it was incentivized. So she showed that this engagement is how we kind of embed that culture of you can test someone, they will say yes, and you just treat like an MOT. And someone likened it to you wouldn't take an MOT and car for an MOT and not do the brakes. So it's changing that culture again. So progress to date. So as you can see, from 2021, we had 335 tests, and we're up to 982 now. And again, going back to that start, the first table, when we first went the pandemic testing restarted, James and the team equated for around 85% of that figure. We've brought that down now to around 50 and varies between 50 and 60% at any one time. So as you can see, the dramatic increase then, which equates to a 492% increase in screening rates, which is massive. If that is wrong, blame Google, because I put it in there. So a couple of examples of best practice of what we've seen. So SALT, or kind of people might know it as PSALT, primary substance abuse liaison teams. They offer low threshold prescribing of OST. So basically, if you're not complex mental or physical health needs, you would go to SALT for maintenance prescribing of methadone or buprenorphine. Many conversations, my contract monitoring officer saying they need to be testing. Contract monitoring officer saying, no, the service manager said they don't work with people at risk. I'm like, the current OX jumpers. And then we're working with the prevalence in the infectious disease report of someone who's injected currently or historically, we're working within a 1 in 3 prevalence rate, which is quite frightening. Misleading prevalence as well. Now we've got a kind of handle on there. But I'm just saying they need to be tested. They need to be tested. Fight back constantly. So lo and behold, James and the team went in there, provided that robust leadership as we talked about. They showed that people will get tested. So if we look at before James and the team went in there, 3 tests completed in 8 years, which is an absolute travesty, not to speak too negatively. The notion that this patient group were not at risk or deemed low risk was nonsense. And initially when James went in there to test, I think prevalence, James, was around 10%. 10%, so 1 in 10 people. Yeah. So out of 100 people, 10 positives. You look at that for the onward transmission, the onward spread's quite frightening. What it did prove was they needed to be testing. So from that piece of work, they've now completed 228 tests since October in 2022. They've employed a BBV single point of contact in the organisation who coordinates and oversees all the testing, ensure staffs are trained on and have the appropriate new access. And they do the 6 monthly retest as well. Our kind of substance using population, they're quite kind of innovative. They would have a urine test and deem them low risk. Having a urine test every 3 months, service users would know when to stop taking certain drugs. You could buy a urine drug screening tool from Amazon for £3.89. I looked at it just now and it could get delivered tomorrow. So a lot of our substance using populations were kind of perhaps engage in high risk activity and then stopping it when they would do a UDS to maintain their script. But now we seem to have a handle on that. It's a routine 6 monthly test until, we kind of deem that they're not in that high risk category anyway. And I say the treatment pathway, on-site treatment pathway, James and the team have simplified the treatment pathway. So I think we're quite guilty of developing pathways, rigid pathways for chaotic people who don't stick to those pathways. Previously, we used to have an assessment service open 9:30 till 12. That was, it wasn't fit for purpose. So a treatment pathway is quite simply, James, you just say, pull them in front of me. That's the pathway. Put them in front of me. I'll treat them. And that works well. It works well. Services like that as well. They know they can contact James and it's kind of nice and simple. Then we have Devodal Swansea and Devodal MPT. Them peaks and troughs, working probably with the most chaotic individuals in Western Bay, and they would sometimes go 6 months without any activity, reliant on the support of the BV lead or the BV clinical team, and often those individuals would become crutches for Dyfodol. They would go, oh, I refer you to James, refer you to James, refer you to James, refer you to James. That had to stop. We needed the kind of specialist nurses providing specialist services, and DBSTs wasn't that. So Dyfodol then done a similar model to SALT, and they've completed 437 tests since January 2023 as well. So it's approximately 30 people per month as well. We do expect that to drop as they test the entire caseload, and then obviously someone would be tested once every 6 months. So BV testing and naloxone forms part of every medical and non-medical assessment and standard 6-monthly retest, streamlined treatment pathway similar to SALT as well. So rapid access service as well. So this is a community-based service provided by Dyfodol, first to make test on entry as part of standard practice. Post-pandemic, RAPS has consistently screened 100% of caseload. It's only 30 people, but 100% of people are screened as they enter that service. It's the first service in Western Bay to deliver an outreach in the community in its truest form, and that means going out to see people. I've heard people on the phone saying I deliver outreach services because they phoned someone that's 20 miles away. That's not outreach. And RAPS has become the first service in Western Bay to meet the micro-elimination criteria, mirroring the criteria set in England. I'm a patriotic Welshman, so the only thing I want to copy off England is the micro-elimination criteria. We are working with colleagues at Gilead to look at how we can accredit services and have a carrot on the stick. But we think the rapid access service is going to become the first community-based service in Wales to achieve micro-elimination, which is amazing. Project ADA funding as well, which is from the Home Office, has allowed us to expand that project based on that model as well. And last couple of slides. So other areas obviously have the support of the HEPC Trust and the HEPC Trust peers that are in place. Unfortunately, we didn't have the funding in kind of available to do that. So we were reliant on our peer interventions project. So our peer interventions project started as the peer-to-peer naloxone project, which was kindly funded by Welsh Government. And what we decided to do then is kind of upskill the peers. So they deliver all 3 specialist harm reduction interventions. They have in-house training that's provided by Barod as well in Swansea, and they deliver the work. And this is an example of the work going on. So that's the Wallis welfare vehicle, which thanks to the Wallis providing that. And we have a vehicle in Swansea and a vehicle in Neathport Talbot, and they go to the hotspots. That's informed by our prevalence data such as non-fatal and fatal episodes. So they'll go and base real time where they need to be and find those at-risk individuals. The peers as well provide services outside normal working hours as well, which is quite good. And they supported the BV team in the delivery of 2 hit days as well, which Chris in the middle there is a good case study where he's tested someone recently who he started his injecting career with over 25 years ago. The guy was known to services for over a decade, in and out of services, and never been tested. Whether that's been offered a test or never been tested is something we leave the imagination. But Chris was able to engage that individual, and the guy actually said, Chris, you're a role model. I want to be like you one day. So it shows the power of that peer-to-peer network. And we've got plans for the peer network as well to engage with the hard-to-reach populations, or those not known to services, which makes up about 50% of our substance using population in Western Bay. I think that's it. 2 seconds. Oh, no, one more. Promise, one more. I'm on time. So again, we've got the BV subgroup. So we've incepted, we talked about the national BV service provider forum. We've got a BV subgroup locally, which is all the services or testing sites that are offered testing. And then we've got the oversight group chaired by Dr. Keith Reid, who's moving on. And we've also got a pilot being run by Barod in Swansea, which is specifically targeted at young persons, young people that are in supported housing. There's 136 of them, and we're aiming to screen 100% of those for incentivisation. So that's going to be up and running in the next couple of months, weeks rather. I'll stop there because you give me the evils. All right.
Maybe one quick question, if there is one.
Or not.
If there isn't a quick question, I just like to say, love that presentation. It's amazing what you've achieved. And, we often come here and say, it's easy because all they have to do is test. And in that sense, it is easy. But as you've demonstrated, it really isn't easy. Changing culture is not easy. And what you've achieved is phenomenal. And also shows us, okay, it's not easy, but it can be done. So thank you ever so much. And big kudos to you. Okay, so Sarah Holtz.
Right, which one is that? Get that one.
I think that's that one there.
Oh.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Sarah Hulse. I'm the bloodborne virus lead pharmacist in Bexley in North Wales, and I'm presenting this today, which is a collaborative project that we did at the end of February with the Hepatitis C Trust and help from lots of other people. The reason for doing the project was when we're putting our plan together in North Wales, following the Welsh Health Circular. Obviously, community pharmacy testing is really important, and that's one of the things that's really key for North Wales, because a lot of people only access NSP through community pharmacy, and sometimes that's the only healthcare professional they see. But also in our plan, peer support in the community is something that we needed to introduce. You heard about HMP Berwyn and the successful peer projects that we had going in there. But it's a gap in our community programme. Liz presented our rapid test and treat, but we haven't got peer support. And that's something we wanted to explore, make a start on, I suppose. And at last year's conference, Danny kindly said that he would help support us with a project and release some staff from Cardiff and Birmingham to help support that. So I've got a few pictures there. So bottom left is Chapel Street, Rowlands Pharmacy in Wrexham. And that was the site that we chose because when we were doing our planning, and Baz said we would help with that, mapping all our pharmacies out, this one stood out like a sore thumb. It had 1,300 unique individuals for NSP, according to the data, which was way above everything else, which was about 300 or 400 for any other site. So it made sense. It was a really busy pharmacy in Wrexham. And it had a car park at the back. So our plan was top right there, the harm reduction van, we'd park it at the back door. And when people were accessing NSP, we'd get the peers to engage them, bring them onto the van and do the testing. Unfortunately, it didn't work out like that. And we hit lots of problems in terms of parking and permissions, which I won't bore you with. But luckily, bottom right, Hope Street Church came to the rescue in Wrexham. They're just down the road from the pharmacy. And so we were able to do testing there. And we eventually got permission to park at a GP surgery on the Saturday morning. So it was a 1 week project. We couldn't have the church on the Wednesday, but we did it the rest of the week. And then we had to park the van on the Saturday morning at the GP surgery. So we got a bit closer. As I mentioned, there were teams that were kindly released from Birmingham and from Cardiff to come and join us. And it's called locally OJ's, that pharmacy we learnt. So we had a peer coordinator based inside the pharmacy, who were engaging people when they came for NSP. And then we had peers that transported. It was a couple of minutes walk from the pharmacy down to the church where the testing would take place. Because we'd had to adapt the project, we decided we may as well do some opportunistic testing in the city centre, so from hostels or from people that were encountered by the peers who were at high risk. We did use vouchers. We had to get people from the pharmacy down the road, and the HEPC Trust are brilliant at engaging people, but we needed that extra incentive to get people to another location, and also hot refreshments when they got there. The testing was done by peers and also by the BBV nurses at the church or on the van. And we used oral swabs, and if that came back positive, then they had testing on the Cepheid, and everybody got a DBS test. Now, another aim we wanted to do at the same time of the project was to also launch this site for doing pharmacist BBV testing after that. But again, we hit quite a few problems with trying to make that happen. We tried when we couldn't park to go inside the pharmacy with the consultation room, but again, there were lots of barriers, which I'm happy to discuss with people if they want to know. Yeah, but we had to go with what we had for the project because I should have mentioned we were kindly given money by the APB, which was slippage money. So we had the time, and this is what caused the biggest problem is we had to deliver the project before financial year end. So when we hit problems, we just had to keep going because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to deliver anything. So For the project, we tested 55 people during that 1 week project. We had one person that attended at the church who refused testing when they got there. We couldn't have done any more. He was a Polish gentleman and we had a Polish nurse, BBV nurse, but we still didn't manage once he was in the place to actually get him tested. But he was the only one. There were 21 people who came back antibody positive, and 5 of those went on to be PCR positive. So you can see there's quite a good proportion there that obviously the right type of people that we're testing. 23 actually came from the pharmacy and 32 were from the street, although there may be some overlap with those people actually accessing the pharmacy, but they came off the street during the project. So 4 of the positives were from the pharmacy site, 1 from coming in from the street. For the people who were negative, we didn't have any new Hep Bs or HIVs identified, but there was one patient who was infected with Hep B and HIV, who we already knew and had actually treated. When Liz talked this morning about the community hub, we treated them previously there. So it was quite interesting because we had no data really previously on community pharmacy. This is why we wanted to do it. We'd done one pilot where we tested 11 people and got 4 positives in real, but other than that we didn't know what we were going to find, so it was quite interesting that we actually knew quite a lot of the people that we saw that week. There were 8 people who we'd previously treated and 1 was currently on treatment with us during that week. Of the people we tested, 78% were known to SMS, 3 had recently been registered there. So I've just put up the details for the 5 people who were positive. 4 of them, as I say, came from the pharmacy, and those 4 were all known to SMS, not necessarily currently engaging, but were known to SMS. And interestingly, 3 of them were also on the re-engagement list that I went back to cross-check that to see, are they people that have been, positive before? So the first 2 we currently have got on treatment. The 3rd patient was somebody that we had treated at the hub in the past. Now he said he felt he put himself at risk again, so he was possibly reinfection. Although interestingly, Graham's just presented on the hits in SMS. So he was tested back in August, obviously antibody positive, PCR negative, but because we had the care feed there, he came back as positive and with a low viral load. So we would have treated him because he's someone we already knew. We took the treatment during the project week, but unfortunately, his brother died and it was his funeral that week. So we've been unable yet to get him on treatment. Since that, he's not been in a place to start treatment. The next patient, patient 4, is hopefully about to start treatment. And then the 5th patient is the only one that wasn't known to SMS, didn't come from the pharmacy, was someone that was from the opportunistic testing. And currently, we've not managed to get hold of that patient. We're trying to get hold of that patient. So that's one of the issues. Another reason that we need peers, because obviously in England, they do really successful testing projects. The Birmingham team that came, they're involved both in testing and also in support with treatment. But we only had a 1 week project, so that wasn't possible. So I've just put some of the challenges and successes. So as I say, I could bore anyone tonight with some of the barriers and problems that we had in terms of paperwork, approvals, trying to do slippage money, parking problems. I mean, it just goes on and on. Contracts. I mean, for a 1 week project is a lot of work, but I'm hoping that that's now, we've got that foundation, so that sets the way for future projects and future collaborations. The Saturday morning that the HEPC Trust had said that actually weekends tend to be really good time for doing testing. And obviously we could get permission to park on a weekend because the GP surgery was too busy the rest of the time. But actually, because the chemist was only open on a Saturday morning, that was potentially really good time to catch people. Unfortunately, it snowed that day, so the weather was against us on that day. We did do some testing that day, and I think going forward, that's probably a really good opportunity. And although pharmacies are hopefully going to start doing testing, we know that they're very busy and probably not all the pharmacies in North Wales are going to take on testing. So this was a bit of a pilot to see what we can do to support people. And I'm thinking weekends is probably a good time to do that. Payday happened. So we started on a Monday, really busy on the Monday for testing, and the Tuesday, and then it just got gradually less And there was payday, that the funeral that happened, he was a really prominent person in the area, so lots of people were not about. So these are all things that we've kind of learned that we need to sort of think about. And we also found, we went to the hub, which, you know, Liz had talked about, that's very quiet now. So we used to have 50 to 70 people coming every week. They said they now get about 10 people as a maximum because there's less agencies there. And a lot of our clients have moved out to Chester. And apparently there's quite a lot of them at the moment also in HMP Bearer. So at least we're getting them there. But I turned up to the hub just to check there was nobody that we could get. There were 2 people and I'd already seen them that morning in the pharmacy. So we did do everything that week. The HEPC Trust were amazing. They engaged everybody that, you know, was possibly around, but we didn't get as many people as we thought we might for the week. I've mentioned parking. Obviously the distance from the actual pharmacy is a potential challenge to get people down there. So we were very glad that HEPC Trusts were helping to do that. And then that making the contact with those that are not engaged in SMS is a potential challenge. One of the comments from the peers though that were inside the pharmacy, which is encouraging for going forward, was that actually the pharmacy staff there had really amazing relationships with the people coming to collect an SP, and they said that's not something that they've seen in other pharmacies they've been in England. So they knew everything about the people's lives that were coming and actually had a really good relationship. So I'm hoping that that's going to be really positive for ongoing testing at the pharmacy. Successes. So yeah, peer engagement was fantastic. Another thing that they were doing, the peers, when they were there, was speaking to the pharmacy staff at Chapel Street, trying to break down some of the challenges and concerns they had about starting doing BBV testing themselves. That was sort of another thing that we wanted to get out of the project. Obviously, we'd hope that they'd start straight away, but they will hopefully be doing it in the near future. Having rapid test results is obviously really useful, and we've got lots of valuable data out of what we've done. Vouchers and refreshments, I think, were very important for getting people down to the church. The church community site in itself we were really fortunate. We were in like a stairwell, sounds not very grand, but the team that were there is a really beautiful sort of converted warehouse kind of thing. So we had a really great testing area, and the feedback from people coming was that actually they felt so much more comfortable, both in terms of the team's relaxed approach, being away from SMS, that they were much more likely to come and engage there. So I think that's something for us going forward. We need a new permanent sort of community site somewhere to do our testing. Collaborative working was obviously amazing. It worked really well. There were lots of people involved to try and put this project together, and I think it worked quite seamlessly, really. The teams worked really, really well together, and I'm hoping that's just the start of things. So yeah, lots of learning, and Chapel Street itself is hopefully going to start testing. Unfortunately, in North Wales, for our target sites for the initial year, the majority of them are multiples, both Boots and Roland's. We've got a few independents that have started, but it's those 2 multiples that are the key. So Roland's want to see what happens with Chapel Street going forward, and Boots have now said they're going to wait to see what happens with Chapel Street before they start it. So I'm quite glad that we've had the HEPC Trust in to educate everybody, and we're making the best start that we can, but we'll have to wait and watch this space as the pharmacy team start to do it themselves. So yeah, and then that's just really a thanks to the team, because there were lots of people that were involved, yeah, in both the planning and the delivery. And Paul John came up, and he was hopefully going to start the team off with the testing, but because we weren't able to do that in the time frame, he has at least met the team, and they know that we're all there to support them once they do start doing the testing themselves. So that's it from me.
Okay, another amazing presentation and achievement. Maybe time for one quick question, if there are any. You're off the hook.
Yeah, do come and speak to me. It's
Yeah,
an event about all problems that I have.
Okay, I'm really pushing the risk now, because we're going to try and have someone present via the Teams. I've got no clue if it's going to work or not.
Can you hear me, Brandon? Brandon?
Oh, I messed that up again.
Hi, Tom. It's Andrew. I can see you.
Oh, right.
Hi.
Tom, are you there?
Yes, but you can't. I'm not sure you can hear me.
Hmm. Tom, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Can't just feel like a seance. Tom. I'm getting a Tom. I'm getting a Tom.
I guess just take the sound out, put your computers today again.
Oh yeah.
We should. Don't do that.
Can you hear me now?
You can hear noise from computers. We should be hearing him from Teams. Teams have got that output selected.
Am I not? I'm not joined on Teams at the moment now, am I?
No, yes. Sorry, you need to join Teams on your computer.
I do, don't I?
And then he should come through.
Okay.
Sorry. That's it.
This is a pleasant surprise, Tom.
Yeah. You almost got through a week without having to talk to me.
It's been a great conference.
Yeah, sorry. It's like watching an old man use a computer. Thanks, Baz. Huh? That's what I'm worried about, but we'll see. The AV man assures me that won't happen. Yeah, hopefully.
Hi, can you hear me, Brendan?
Okay. Tom, can you try talking again?
Yeah, hello?
Yeah, okay, we can hear you. That's good. Oh, it's up now.
Do you have my slides there? I'm just going to try and... Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, great. Well, if you can hear me, that's great. Hi, I'm Tom Pembroke. I'm one of the hepatologists at UHW. I'm sorry not to be there with you in the room. What I'd like to do is, having had a chat with Brendan, is present a couple of cases. A case, just to illustrate what happens to people when they get to that end stage of hepatitis C. Because I'm sure there are lots of people in the room who remember that terrible progression of people from viral infection through cirrhosis to decompensation. But I'm sure there are lots of people who this is quite a rare occurrence for them to see this. And certainly when I was an SHO and when I was a junior registrar doing a PhD and coming to Brendan's clinic, we'd see loads of people who unfortunately were dying on the ward. And now it's a really rare occurrence, actually. I can't remember the last time I had somebody with an active hepatitis C infection driving decompensation and death. We still see some people with a hepatocellular carcinoma, but the actual virus itself, and it really is credit to you all. And it's amazing that we're seeing the rates of diagnosis changing and the whole epidemiology changing is fantastic. So if we go on to the next slide, this is a man who some of you from Bridgend may know. He was diagnosed in June and he's 69, but he was found under a hedge. He was unresponsive. The ambulance came. His blood sugar was 2.1, so really low at the point where you may well fit. He was brought into Princess of Wales, revived with some glucose, and it transpires that during that day he drank 20 cans of cider plus vodka plus some cocaine, and that was not an unusual amount of alcohol for him. He'd as he came in, because he was collapsed and found under a hedge, there was a question as to whether there was a head injury with his unresponsive episode. So he had a full body CT scan. And what you can see here is that his liver, which is on the right side of the image, is nodular. It's clearly cirrhotic. It's got two areas within it which are black on the white background. Thank you, Brendan. The other two corners of the liver, and they're suspicious for liver cancers. They've got a funny rim to them. The other things that can be picked out is to the left of the liver, there's a grey area before you get to the bright white ribs. And that's, you can see there, it's got a fluid level, and that's ascites. So this man really has very advanced liver disease that he was completely unaware of. And he, as people frequently are, he was deeply jaundiced. He had a low albumin and his prothrombin time was a little bit off. He's brought into hospital and they started the straightening out process. His detox from alcohol. He had a full liver screen, and he is found to be hepatitis C antibody positive, and then he had quite a high viral load. He was under the care of one of my colleagues there, and his letter to me, because I chair the HCC MDT, was that I've quoted here, basically wasn't sure whether it was appropriate to treat his hepatitis C, given his level of liver failure and his liver cancers. And they'd had that conversation and he'd been referred for palliative care. And he was accepting of that. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Now, the decompensation and the liver failure is worth talking about because it's not seen. If you've just got cirrhosis, what the figures here really represent the stages from cirrhosis going through portal hypertension. So if you've got cirrhosis without any varices, your risk of dying is about 3% a year. Once you develop varices, it goes up to about 7%. If your varices bleed, which is often a cause for the first time you're diagnosed with advanced liver disease, if you're not screened, then your chance of dying in that year is about 20%. Similarly, if you have ascites. So you can see that actually your risk of mortality is really quite big when you get to advanced liver disease. And if you've got a liver cancer, because the liver cancer is very challenging to treat, and it can drive liver decompensation, and the decompensation prevents treatment of the cancer. In the scenario we're talking about here, your median survival is about 3 to 4 months. And if you look at his MELD score, so his chance of dying in the next 90 days, just on the synthetic function, excluding the cancer, sorry, I didn't put it in there, his chance of dying was about 25 to 30% in the next 90 days in the absence of anything else. So quite a high risk scenario. If we can move on to the next slide. And really what you see is it doesn't really matter what the cause of your liver disease is. You develop a common pathway and that drives the fibrosis. And then you end up with this nodular liver that helps to produce the portal hypertension and lays down the right scenario for liver cancers. If you just hit again, please, Brendan. But we know now that, and it's becoming increasingly clear, that if you remove that insult, or one of the insults, which is important to remember, because if you have a virus and alcohol, which is the typical one, or a cause of liver disease and obesity with diabetes driving fatty liver disease, that progression is far more rapid. So if you remove one or both of the insults, the progression of liver disease will certainly slow, and you may well see a reversal of the liver disease. The scarring will remain, but it will remain stable. And that's shown here for alcohol. This is a very old paper, and it demonstrates the difference with a very small number of people to quite a significant degree. So this is a really true finding, that if you stop drinking, your overall survival is greatly enhanced compared to those who continue to drink. And actually, if you're looking at things like pressure across the liver, that inflammation will start to improve after about 3 days of abstinence. So it is worth remembering that when you have these really decompensated people, if you remove some of that insult, actually things can get an awful lot better quite quickly, and long-term survival can improve. If we go on to the next slide, please. And so this is an old slide, and it's really to talk about hepatitis C. Sorry, can you hit it again? Sorry. These are, so as you know, you get exposed, you seroconvert, 20% of people will clear it. And then you've got about 20 to 30 years, depending on whether you're a man, your age, alcohol, HIV. That may shorten or quicken, but about 20% of people will end up with cirrhosis, and up to 5% of people will develop HCC. Now, what you can see is that, as we just said, if you remove that insult, your progression to decompensation may well reverse, and your risk of dying reduces. Once you've developed HCC, that 5% a year who develop HCC, that's actually quite a significant, that's a huge moment in that person's life, because actually about 88% of people diagnosed with HCC die from that cancer. It's higher than almost any other cancer that's likely to kill you. So, but we know that if you get in, clear the variants, you reduce that risk of progression, you reduce the risk of cancer development, and that's really important. We do have treatments, and it's worth, and what I want to do is just mention those. So we talk often in liver disease about transplant. That's a great treatment for decompensation. You have to be the right person to go forward. It can cure HCC, and he was borderline for this. You can consider things like surgery for liver cancers, immunotherapies now, you can burn the lesion, you can deliver TACE, which is chemotherapy and embolization directly injected onto the cancer, or you can treat it. However, in this scenario, this gentleman unfortunately had very few treatment options. He had ascites and liver failure. If we tried any of these treatments, unfortunately, we would just progress his disease and taken time away from him rather than treated him. Transplant is very challenging here. He is quite old. You definitely do worse if you're over 70. And, you know, he's 68, 69. And if you have a chaotic lifestyle, alcohol excess and drug use, your liver is more likely to fail, as particularly if you continue to drink post-transplant. So actually you expect to see a 3-month washout to see if the liver starts to recompensate before you would refer for a transplant, typically. If we go on to the next slide, please, Brendan. So actually he came to my clinic and I saw him again, and he, from my point of view, you know, he was a retired plumber. He'd drunk a huge amount. He probably was infected 20 years previously when he injected drugs for a short period. He'd actually remained abstinent for quite a while, and you can see his bilirubin in that bottom graph that had gone right up at the time of his diagnosis and dropped like a stone as he'd stopped drinking. He was, one of the challenges was that, you know, he was socially quite a challenge. He socially needed quite a lot of support. He lived in supportive living. His friend was his next of kin, and to get to hospital transplant, he missed the appointment, then it was difficult to get another one because he needed hospital transplant just to get from Bridgend to UHW. Unfortunately, this is really challenging to get somebody like this to a liver transplant because of the logistics of getting up and down to London, and they have to make their own way there. So that made this quite difficult. But actually, when I saw him, his ascites is starting to resolve. He was feeling well. He requires some dietetic input. My feeling was that although he wasn't fit enough for treatment of his HCC, if we could continue to make him better, there was a route through here. He could have treatment, which could be very effective. It may not be curative, but might get him 3 years, 20 months to 3 years of median survival. Go on to the next slide, please. So he was treated with eclusa and ribavirin. He achieved SVR 12, and we had planned him for TACE treatment, and that after he'd had his viral suppression and finished his eclusa and ribavirin. It was technically a bit more difficult because obviously you had to treat one on the left and one on the right, so it's slightly more of a treatment. And unfortunately, although he remained abstinent and the virus had been cleared, on the day that he came in, we repeat his bloods as standard, and he had further deterioration. And it's felt that actually trying to treat it would cause more problems. We've discussed him again in the MDT meeting this week, and we feel that unfortunately for him, actually, there aren't any good treatment options we can offer him now. But what I would say is that we've got somebody now whose overall survival is 3 to 4 months, which is the same as we would consider it a year ago now, or more or less a year ago. And through abstinence and suppression of his virus, I think that actually his liver has compensated, and he certainly has had more time, but we've been left in a difficult stage at each time trying to balance potential treatment options with the severity of his liver disease. And those really were that was the case that I wanted to present, just to give you a flavour of the challenges of managing the liver disease and how the appropriate use of antiviral therapies can give people a lot of benefit and give us a pathway to further treatments in the future.
So this is a two-part section. I knew that was going to happen. Tom, I'm going to hang up on you, but I hope you're going to stay there because I just want to thank you. But I do want to get rid of the echo. Or was it gone? Oh, you've got rid of it for me. Okay, thank you. It's a two-part section. So Baz is going to give us a talk about managing decompensation as well in terms of treatment. But that talk's phenomenal, isn't it, in terms of reminding us of what we've achieved, because this really was a common event and it now is an extremely rare event. Also highlighting the challenges and how we are really grateful for our support from the support we get from our hepatology colleagues who manage these extremely difficult cases towards the end, and how effective the treatment can be even at such a late stage. So Tom, thanks ever so much for that presentation. Baz is going to talk now. I'm not sure if you're able to stay on, or I know you've got a toddler. And everybody's been complaining about the way they've been recruited to give a talk today. But I can tell you that Tom was the worst because I rang him on Monday. So thank you for stepping in at such short notice. Okay, over to you, Baz.
So I'm just going to present a clinical case. Originally, Brendan asked me to talk about managing cirrhotics and people living with HCV, and I thought I don't know anything about cirrhosis really, because I send them all to like Tom or Bridgesh, so I didn't think that was like very fair. So I'm going to talk about clinical cases. Some of you who've worked in Cardiff will definitely know, and I've called it a rock and a hard place. So I'm going to go straight into the case, and I don't know how well it's going to project. It's quite small. So I've done it as a timeline. It's good if you can't see it because it means that I can target the back of the room to ask some questions. So Mr. S, nice bloke, 59-year-old chef, who was diagnosed with hepatitis C originally in 2012. It was unclear how he acquired hepatitis C. He said he was attacked in the 1970s, age 17, and he did have a blood transfusion then. So he wasn't somebody who had injected drugs. He did become a drinker. And when he originally presented in 2012, he was treated, he was diagnosed with hepatitis C. It was genotyped, it was genotype 3A, which was very relevant then because the only treatment we had then was interferon, pegylated interferon and ribavirin. And I don't know if Del, were you here then? Yeah. And so treatment for him was very, very tricky, and he managed 3 months of the 48 weeks that we used to give. But he just couldn't tolerate the ribavirin. He had lots and lots of support from the clinical nurse specialists. He had lots of support in terms of drugs to ameliorate the symptoms that he was getting with the ribavirin. I think he had transfusions, but he just wasn't able to tolerate it. So we were like, okay, we'll keep you on the books. We know about you now. And he was then he then came regularly in 2013 to our clinic, the infectious diseases clinic, and he was very good at attending. So when he was seen in 2013, we had access to a fibroscanner, and his fibroscan score showed that it was high, it was 10.1. So he did have a degree of cirrhosis then, but he didn't have any of the other features of liver disease particularly. So, you know, if you were going to score him, he would be Child's Pew A, if anything. And he was very stable. And at that time, we weren't able to offer him much apart from monitoring. So then in 2014, he I've got confused now, haven't we? Yeah. So in 2014, he had access on a named patient basis to these new directly acting antivirals, which was amazing. And he was a bit worried about taking these because he's like, oh, I really didn't get on with the ribavirin. He required a bit of persuasion, but eventually he did take in. He took 12 weeks of sofosbuvir and daclitazivir, and he tolerated this really with very limited side effects. At that time, we did consider giving him ribavirin with it, but he was just so dead against the idea of it that we were like, okay, right, fine, no thanks. So he did get to SVR, but then he relapsed at how many weeks? 8 weeks post-treatment. So we used to keep a much closer eye on patients at that time. Now we're quite gung-ho about when we take their HCV viral loads again. So once again, he went back into follow-up. He then in 2015, we knew he had genotype 3A. We were able now to do resistance testing, and we found that he actually had resistant virus, which sort of explained why he hadn't responded to the Sofos and the daclitazivir that he had originally. And through some real pep talking, the nurses persuaded him to have the Sofos and daclitazivir again, but with ribavirin and for a longer period of time, for 24 weeks. He actually got to an undetectable viral load at 13 weeks. But then that's when we stopped the ribavirin when he's because he really was having a really hard time tolerating, but he did manage to take the 24 weeks of the Sofos and the daclitazivir. So everything was like going really well. We were like, brilliant. But then when we did the SVR24, his viral load was detected again. So tricky character. So he stays in follow-up. Now, great that nobody can see anything, even me, even though I'm stood right next to it. So then in 2017, he gets progressive liver disease. So he presents with a varicose bleed. So this is the first time he's been admitted to hospital because of his liver disease. He has a varicose bleed. He comes in, he has one endoscopy, says there's no varices there, there's no bleeding point seen. He's still in hospital. 5 to 7 days later, he has another in-hospital bleed, and this time they do see varices, which do get banded. So I want to know, for those of you that prescribe drug treatment, like, what would you do now? So we know he's got resistance. We know he can't tolerate ribavirin. We know he's got decompensated liver disease. What would you offer him now? Yeah. So there are a family of drugs called protease inhibitors, which would be suitable for somebody like him if he wasn't decompensated. And the advice has always been that in those that are decompensated, by giving a PI, you can put them at a greater risk of even worse decompensation of their liver function. And so we're always encouraged to not give them PI-based therapy. But this guy doesn't have any options now for non-PI based therapy. So he's ended up in that situation, and his liver disease over, the 5 years that we've known him has progressed. So he's gone from Charles Pugh A to Charles Pugh B, and inevitably he's going to track on going down that route. So we did take a risk, and we did give him PI based therapy, and he had a really good clinical response. He was very closely monitored. He didn't decompensate on it. That was a bit of luck, a lot of finger crossing on our part. And he did do clinically very well for quite a long period of time. So between 2017 and 2022, he was having regular follow-up with hepatology. He stopped coming to ID clinic because we cured his hepatitis C. So I wanted to show the case, because sometimes you are between a rock and a hard place, and sometimes you do have to make a really difficult decision, and we do that all the time, really. We take risks on patients' behalf. So we inform them of the potential risk, and we talk to them about why we are offering them this high risk option, because the other option is that inevitably he's going to progress to end stage liver disease more rapidly, and there's a chance that this might not happen. And I think this is case is a really good example of why it's important to be really frank and honest with your patients, and having a two-way conversation with them rather than dictating to them the therapy or even interpreting the research that we have. Sometimes what the data that we have, it is good quality data, but it's based on large populations, and an individual won't always respond as a population will respond to therapy. And sometimes it is worth taking the risk, as long as it's sort of a calculated risk and there's informed consent. So this man then was in regular follow-up. Now, sadly, in 2022, he had the first diagnosis of hepatocellular carcinoma. So HCC in some ways is a good cancer if you're already in follow-up, because it is very slow growing. And if it's caught early, there are, like Tom mentioned, there are a number of good quality treatment options for him. So he's somebody who would never have been suitable for transplant, and that was very, very early on that he was not deemed suitable for transplant. So in 2022, though, he had his first HCC, and that was effectively treated with microablation. And then he's got another 18 months of good quality life and surveillance. But then sadly, it's come back at the end of 2023, and now the tumour is not considered treatable. But you can see that from 2012 to 2024, because he's still alive now, he was seen in clinic at the end of March, he has had those 10 years, 10, 12 years of good quality life. And he probably would not have got to 2024 if we hadn't taken the risk of treating him before. So hence the point of presenting the case. So, lots of what we do in medicine is a balancing act, and HCV, falls into the same thing. So the eradication of HCV, as Thomas mentioned, you're taking away an inflammatory risk factor, and that can decrease your MEL score. It can increase your chance of recompensation. It can improve your synthetic liver function, and that can give you longevity of life and decrease your morbidity. But then there is this risk when we give, for some people, of HCV treatment. It itself can carry a potentially significant risk. I've put significant in brackets because actually lots of the data that we have about the use of PIs is older data, and it's from the older PIs, and also those PIs were used in conjunction with interferon and ribavirin, which carried all of their own risks of decompensation and side effects that patients found it difficult to tolerate. So it's all sort of mushed up together, but then when we present it, we say, oh, it was because of the PIs that they decompensated. I don't think it's that straightforward. But the difficulty we end up with is that, once that data is out there, it is really hard to go against it and put people potentially at risk. And when I was looking last night to see what papers there are looking at the use of directly acting antiviral therapy in long-term hepatic function in those who've got decompensated liver disease, there is very little out there on just PI use. So this is probably the largest cohort I found. So there's 642 people in this paper. Actually, about only 100 of just under 100 of them received PI-based therapy. So most of them actually received, like non-PI based therapy because they had virus that was amenable to that. But 100 of them did receive PI-based therapy, and they didn't. When they did the data analysis, they didn't separate out the outcomes based on PI therapy or non-PI therapy, and overall there was a statistically significant improvement in their MELD scores, and that median follow-up, but the median follow-up was 4 years. It showed the MELD score, was there's no difference between being treated and not being treated. But what they didn't or can't show you is that would those people who had this decompensated liver disease, would they have got to 4 years? And I think there is there are like case studies of patients like the one that I've just presented, but there is no really good quality data looking specifically at that group of people using those PI drugs, and especially the newer PI drugs.
Okay, thanks, Baz. I think we've seen there that the advanced cirrhotic patient can be difficult to manage, but there are options available. So if you do see such patients, which is a rarity these days, keep in mind that there might be something available for them. Okay, it's very late in the day. I've given myself the last talk. I was out with Louise Davis last night, and she said to me, why are you talking until 5:30? I see she's gone, so she's voted with her feet. Very sensible. So I'm going to keep it, I'll try and keep it brief. I'll definitely finish by 5:30. I put something in, and I've got to be honest with you, I don't know whether to play it or not. I'm getting cold feet about it, because it's quite irrelevant. But I kind of liked it. So I will play it. I'll go at risk. This is something that I've been listening to recently. It's called soul music, and for those of you who haven't heard it, it's basically
services. When Jay was a child.
Oh, hang on, I've started it quickly. It's a very famous piece of music, and there's normally 3 or 4 stories of how it's impacted people. And I'm just going to play you one story from one piece of soul music, which is called, the actual piece of music is Shine On You Crazy Diamond. And like I say, it's a bit irrelevant, but I'm hoping I'm going to be able to pull it together after. So I'll just play this. It's a patient story.
A lot of support, but when he became 16, the services ended and he was just left. One day, I came in from work and he started cutting himself. He was in the bath and he was just curled up and he was just crying. So I tried to get him back into the services, took him to the doctors, tried to get referrals. I phoned up talking therapies. And eventually we did get him back into the system, although be it an adult system. Jay's OCD was getting worse, so he started self-medicating with alcohol. And it got to the point where the mental health services said that they could no longer help him because he was drinking alcohol. And so therefore they discharged him. I managed to get him a referral to a drug and alcohol service, but they said that Jay wasn't appropriate for their services because of his mental health issues. So then he started self-medicating with prescription medication, anything really to quieten the voices in his head. So he was cracked, he was broken.
You can remember
when you were young. He shone like the sun. Over a period of a year, his spirit, his soul was being crushed. Now there's a look in your eyes, like black holes in the skies. The day actually, the day he died, we spent the day together that day. And he said he loved me, and he went off to go and see his girlfriend, and I took an overdose of morphine, and he died that night. Shine On You Crazy Diamond, it really had to be the first song that I played at his funeral. The lyrics literally speak so much to me of my son.
Okay, so it's not directly related because it's not hepatitis B and it's not hepatitis C, but the point of this final talk, I think, for me, was to talk a little bit about who we are. I'm actually a bit emotional having listened to it, so sorry about that. And what I think we are not that. We are not a service where if you are someone in need of help, that we're going to have some man-made obstacles that are going to prevent you from accessing care. So when I listen to that, it's a real pet hate of mine, really, and something that really annoys me, that there was someone who needed help, who couldn't access it through alcohol services because of his mental health problems, and then couldn't get mental health care because of his alcohol problems. And that's not what we are, actually. You know, that's something that I'm really proud of in our service, is that we are a service, we are a network that goes out and delivers care to people as they need it. And I know I represent a team that go the extra mile and deliver so much important care without putting any man-made barriers in the way. So respect to you all for that. I didn't expect it to affect me quite as much as that, but it really did. I'll try and compose myself. So what are we then? Well, we are the BBV network, and we have done amazing things, or you have done amazing things. And I'm going to run through some of those things now. So, you know, right from the very beginning, what did we do? Well, we eliminated postcode prescribing. We've always worked collaboratively. There's never been one service which has been more important than the other. All the services have come together. We've treated vulnerable and marginalised communities, and we've taken treatment to the point of need, and we've worked innovatively in a patient-focused approach. So that's an amazing thing, and I just want to congratulate you all for that. We're a team that has saved money. You've seen this slide many times. I only did it for 2 years, or was it 3 years? But in that 2 or 3 year period, we saved around £34 million. We're a team that treats people. These are slides from earlier. And we're a team that cures people. So 4,630 people cured since 2011. And as we heard from Tom Pembroke, hepatitis C patients presenting to the ward with decompensated liver disease is almost a thing of the past, and through the work that you're doing can become completely a thing of the past. So again, thank you to you and congratulations to you. We're a team that delivers firsts. We were the first team in the UK to deliver hepatitis C infected transplants and then eradicate the virus. So we were helping people with kidney disease as well as people with hepatitis. We're the first, I think, worldwide, I can't be 100%, certainly in the UK, to deliver elimination in a remand prison. And like I said earlier, we like doing it so much we did it twice. We're a team that delivers benefits to the wider health service. So again, we've seen 2 cases today at the end around treatment of people with advanced liver disease and what it meant to them in terms of their survival, but we are also reducing the the presentation of hepatocellular carcinoma in relation to hepatitis C, which is a great thing. And we're preventing admission with advanced end-stage liver disease associated with hepatitis C. We're also a team looking to deliver elimination. So this is a slide I showed earlier. And, you know, with a few good years, we can really hit that target. And in so doing, we will hopefully be scooping up some people out there, some hidden people who are silently progressing towards liver cirrhosis. And if we do scoop them up, we will prevent them presenting in the way that Tom described, and we'll do a real service to them and to the health service as a whole. So I showed this earlier, and this was something I was thinking about last night. It's about hard to reach populations. And I was thinking about what is a hard to reach population, and do any of you belong to a hard to reach population? Well, I put it to you that we probably all belong to a hard to reach population. And before you get worried, I'm not going to like come out with some confession. It's probably best some things are kept personal. No, but the point is that we all belong to a population, and they are, to a certain extent, hard to reach if you're not within them. But if you're within them, they're not hard to reach. Now, we know that people who inject drugs, they've got a really good communication system. We don't know what it is. We don't access it very well. But if they want to score some drugs, they're going to score some drugs. So that communication system exists. 100% it exists. And I remember Sarah and Dell telling me a story about when they went into, which area was it in Cardiff? When you went in and there'd been a crackdown and no one was on the street. And then anyway, it doesn't really matter what area it was. Gone in there, there'd been a big police raid. So there was no work for Sarah and Dell that day because everyone was sort of in hiding. And then the police had gone in, shut. Huh? I think it might, anyway, it might have been the Huggood. Anyway, no one there. And then back into that area the next day, and everything's up operating as if nothing's never happened. So, you know, they have very good communication systems, and it's just a case of working out how we get into them. And the same goes for our immigrant population, our asylum seeking population. You know, all of these people will have communication systems. It's just ones that we're not familiar with. So they're only hard to reach to us because we don't know how to reach them. But I don't think they're necessarily hard to reach, if that makes sense. Anyway, have we reached any of these hard to reach populations? Yes, we have. You know, people who inject drugs, heroin, crack, amphetamine users. Yes, regularly in all the health boards, we are accessing those hard to reach populations. There's still work to do. And one of the areas of interest, one of the places that we need to go is beyond the boundary of those who are accessing services. So how do we get into those harder to reach, but presumably are reachable in some form? And that's some work we need to do. Image and performance enhancing drug users. Have you done something on this, Gavin, or not? No.
Didn't find any BDVs. I think we picked up a care from people. We've looked at using oral swabs in the needle exchange, and Dan, who's in the room, has done a bit of straw forming some of the iPad users, and they're not interested.
Yeah, so we have done a little bit, but and it's another area that we need to get into. Chemsex users, yes, we're accessing them through sexual health. People from high prevalence countries, well, yes, we've done some of that. We've done it in Cardiff, we've done it in Newport through the MOS projects, but there's definitely more work to be done there. And if there are people in the room who've got ideas of how we can start accessing those populations, then, you know, we want to hear about them. Sex workers, yes, in Newport, one of the projects that helped win us our award many years ago for, what was it for? Team, for being bloody awesome, but there was a title for it as well. Street homeless, yes, we are in most health boards. Prisons, yes, see Swansea, see Berwyn. So we've eliminated hepatitis C now in Swansea twice, in Berwyn. We've done some work in Park Prison, and we know that that is achievable, and there's more work to be done, but it can be done. Probation, yes, we've seen that today. see Swansea, see Newport. Mother to child transmission, yes, with hepatitis B, again, we can take it to another level, but we are doing good and important work there. There's a question around hepatitis C that's not within our immediate gift to solve in terms of moving to opt-out testing, but there is a work we can do in terms of encouraging lower threshold for testing and better testing in terms of risk factor, because I think we're probably not doing that quite as well as we could be just yet. Migrants and mobile populations and people affected by conflict and civil unrest. Well, Baz runs an asylum seeker clinic in Cardiff and is doing amazing work there for BBV and other health needs of these population, and we're trying to replicate that in Swansea. I just want to remind you of all the achievements that you've made over the years. You know, the network, I think, is probably one of the key aspects that we've developed. That elimination of postcode prescribing, that working together, that is immeasurable in terms of what it delivers. I'm not going to read them all, but you can see we've achieved an awful lot. So a couple of things to be aware of. So we now have the POC testing that you've seen from Ryan and Morgan. So, you know, there's some HIT project options for you. We're open to ideas. We've completely developed a testing pathway that should make testing possible in any format, really. We've got OraSure as an option. We've got dry blood spot testing. We've got CEFID testing. There are so many options, and we've seen how well they can work when they're implemented. Street workers, community links, etc. We've got video observed therapy that we haven't utilised very much, but it's there as an option. And again, so much good work. That's just to highlight again what Liz showed to us and how that can be deployed really successfully in the community. But we've got an accelerated testing pathway, which is also a low threshold test and treat pathway. And I encourage you to bear that in mind. And it was really remiss of me, but I didn't invite Zoe Cousins. Well, I did invite her, but it was even later than I invited Tom. Thank you, Tom. I invited Tom on Monday. I invited Zoe on Tuesday, and Zoe couldn't make it. But Zoe's done amazing work for us. She's now developed a postal testing service. That's the link. So I think there are going to be opportunities for you in your health boards, in your areas, to use this as an opportunity to get people tested. It's very simple. You log on, you go through the questions, it gets sent out to you, and you can get a test sent to your home and you can send it away. So what next? Well, mostly more of the same, because you are an amazing team, and I've said it loads of times, it's a real privilege to represent you. And I just think you're amazing what you do and what you achieve. And we've seen so much of that today. We've seen some sharing of best practice, but one of the frustrations in some ways is that we come and we share best practice, but we have to take it a step further, don't we? We have to replicate that best practice across health boards. That's not easy to do. It's a bit similar to what we were discussing, because it's one thing to know you can do it, it's another thing to actually deliver it. But that is our goal, to transport successful projects to new areas and deliver care to all at the point of need. Just to let you know, to utilise the national roles that we're grateful to Welsh Government for helping to fund. So we've got Louise Davis, who's the point of care testing lead. We've got Paul John, who's also known as Big Papa, our pharmacy lead, Nikki Palmer, project lead, and we've got Morgan and Ryan as our HIT squad. One other thing, just this came through on an email to me yesterday, that the Gilead UK and Ireland Viral Hepatitis Fellowship and Medical Grants Programme is open now. So if you have ideas around a project, there may be an opportunity to get some funding to kickstart something through that, applying through that programme. So in summary, what are we? We are a caring, patient-focused, innovative, non-judgmental service that deliver effective care and cure across health board boundaries to patients regardless of their circumstances, including delivery of care to the disadvantaged and marginalised, and regardless of where they live, with no postcode prescribing, in a prudent, transparent and equitable way, saving money and saving lives. So well done to all of you. Enjoy your evening tonight and celebrate some of your successes, and we'll come back tomorrow. When hopefully I won't be crying. Okay, have a good evening.